Hi and welcome to Watercolor with Sonia. Today we're going to paint a river otter. These little creatures can be quite a menace if you get them onto your boat in the local waters, or like in the Dr. Sun Yat-sen gardens, they managed to get there and really had a tasty feast with the local koi that were in there a few years ago. We still can't figure out how they got in there. They think they got through some kind of a storm sewer pipe and then managed to get in and enjoy themselves. So this little baby has some really nice a dark background. He's sitting on a water's edge with a kind of a little log and a little bit of grass. And so he's got some nice lights and a lot of nice browns, which we don't always get to paint. And the first thing I was going to show you was a little bit of masking fluid. So this is Daniel Smith masking fluid, this is Peeble masking or drawing gum, and this is Winsor Newton's masking fluid. All of them work really well. Some of them are harder to see than others, and they do end up gumming up. Now this is a ruling pen that you can use. What happens here is that there's supposed to be a little peg inside here that keeps this little piece open and closed, and that way you can widen or close the top in the manner that you like. I don't have the tool here. That is the little wheel that goes with it. I just want to show you if I dip it in, and I'm just going to put it a little bit onto his whiskers. So you're just pressing, and the fluid on the inside track there is allowing you to get little lines. And you can use a paintbrush. You don't have to use this because sometimes this can be very daunting and it doesn't get quite the line that you're looking for. The other thing is, if you notice, it's colorless, so it's very hard to see whether I'm actually getting any of the, especially when it dries, it's really hard to see if I actually got any of that on there. I'm just looking at the image, which I will bring up later for you guys on a different screen. And I'll just zoom in right now to the one I've got on my computer, maybe. Here we are. So besides the nice little whiskers, there's other whites in the fur. And then I'm using rough Arches paper. So this is really more just experimental to try and get some whites in the fur. I'm just going to drop in some of this masking fluid into this back area here. There's some shiny bits in between my pencil marks. And so I'm just going to apply it. Because it's rough, I can get a little bit of that masking fluid into different areas on the top layer. And it's not going to be all over the place, but it'll help give me some of those shiny whites that I'm looking for, because there's a bit of shine up in here. Now you could also use candle wax or crayon wax. A white crayon would do, because you just put it on there and it just resists the paint coming in. So that can really help you here. When you start using the masking fluid like I'm using, what happens is you have to wait for it to dry. And if you don't wait for it to dry, it can be get onto your really good brushes and become a very difficult problem for you, because it gums up and dries and then it sticks, especially if you're using real hair on the brushes. It can really affect your brushes. You can get around some of that by using a bit of soap, dishwasher soap on your brush if you want to go that route, but use a synthetic brush and use something that you're not generally using for other parts of your painting that you're really, they've got a special brush for. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do in terms of the masking fluid for the moment, but I will show you, just so you can see. I'll just wipe off the masking fluid on this part here. 1 second. I just want you to see there the color of the other Peeble. What I like, Peeble also carries a product that is charged, that you can shake, and has a fine tip that you can clean. That's very helpful too. Also, I'm just looking at his ears. There's a little bit of white on the edge of his ears here. So see, you can see the Peeble because it is actually a different color. So it helps to just discern that you've got this. and won't disappear when you're painting. When it disappears, it can be kind of difficult to get it back. Here we go. I'm just going to put I see a couple of eyelashes and long little lashes along the eye here that I can just show you how I would do that. Okay, so we've done the masking fluid. Now we're going to let that dry. And I've given you a little bit of an idea of how that's used and what tools you can use with it. So this would just be then rubbed off and cleaned off once it's all dry, and you can clean it like that. You can also add a little bit of water to it, which will help to thin it out a bit. You have to watch that this over time does dry in the bottles and becomes useless because it just gets gummed up. So you have to make sure that you keep it really tight, keep them secure, because otherwise eventually you can't use it any longer. So there is a limited shelf life on it. All right, we'll stop there for a moment and we'll be right back. We're back, and I'm just going to show you the image of our otter. Here we go. So you can see there's some really nice browns and greens and some neutrals with the wood here down below there, and in the background some really dark, nice colors. Yeah, that could be water, that could be just a regular background. You just don't know. Your focus is on the otter. So I thought I'd just show you a couple more things related to masking fluid and wax. So this is candle wax. You could take that and add just a little bit on the edges here, and that would actually retract any of the paint as well. You could even come in and add a little bit more fur pieces just to see if that would help you keep your whites. It's always hard to keep your whites. This is the Peebo product that I was talking about, and this pen allows you to shake. And there's two devices, one that you have is an extra one here and the other one's in here. And what you do is you press down, and eventually after giving enough pressure, that will actually bring out the fluid, and then you can use it just like I did here. The nice thing is you can take this out afterwards and clean it with water. Okay, so those are a few extra little things to help you keep your whites. Today we're going to be using a collection of colors. First, I'd like to show you how you can create your browns, but then I'll be also showing you just normally how I would take a selection of other colors that I already have if you choose not to do your own mixing. So one of the things is to mix a brown, you would take your phthalo blue. That happens to be, that's ultramarine. So let's see if that's, let's clean this off here so you can actually see something that's working. I'm using a Da Vinci brush, a quill brush. Reason I'm using that today is that it has a nice soppy head, and it really can pick up a lot of color. And because I'm using the rough arches, I need to have more water on there to allow it to go in between the rivulets and things like that. So making sure I have a good soppy brush. And I'm only working on a 9x12 piece of paper, and so I don't need anything bigger than this, which is an actual, I think it's a petite gris. It's very small, but I would say that's normally like a 6 on a regular round. So let's try this again. Permanent rose, here we are. Hansa yellow will give you an orangey color, right? Those are two of your color mixes that you already can mix up. And then if you add a blue, phthalo blue, you'll start to get to your gray. But the more of a warmer color you have in there, the more of a brown you'll get. So your reds and your yellows, if they're warmer, so Hansa yellow light is not as warm as cadmium, so a cadmium yellow would be easier to get your first brown to, like, okay, a little bit more yellow, and then you add just a little bit more blue to it, and then voila, you have a brown color. So that can be used, and then I'll just show you along here. So that is the wood, but that wood is more gray, so I would probably not use that there. I'm going to lift that off. I'm going to use that more for the fur. I'll use a lighter, more neutral color here at the base. So let's start with the fur. I'm just bringing my picture back up here. I could even use just a little red on its own. Give it more of a, because there's a nice glow in here. So let's start with a little bit of that red around in the back by the neck. I'm not worried about the grasses. We'll just go straight down through the fur here and get some nice color in there, even around here. Now if you watch carefully, if I'm not too fast and I just brush across, I get a nicer application. Sometimes I'll go down and I'll start moving the brush around too quickly, and of course what happens is I'm lifting, depending on which way I move that brush, I'm lifting back the paint. So one stroke one way is always better than going back and forth. You can see some of the wax is actually ensuring that I don't get everything completely covered because I put some wax in there. And there's another way to also create the effects of fur here. If you had added water on this side, it will pull that up. So let's try that. Everything's dry, and it's been dry so far that I've been applying everything. If I put a little bit of water along here, a little bit more, and now I come back in with some of my coloring. I'm using some yellow ochre quickly because it has almost the same coloring as I just had. If I put that up there, you see how that pulls up? And we're going to make it very dark back here anyway, so we can use that as an effect for the fur if you want. It's a great way to try and get that, because if we're doing it the other way, you're not going to get any of that. Now you've got a big line here too, that doesn't help us. So I would recommend also not putting quite as much of a dark line, but in order for you to see the imaging better, that's what I wanted to show you. So that's another way to create some fur along there. Now, most of this area is quite light. We could leave it white, or we could add in this bits of just like the yellow ochre. Well, just a little bit. Raw sienna is also very good. That would be very good if you did it lightly with a raw sienna. Okay, so now we need a brown, and sepia is a great brown. Neutral tint can also be used. Burnt umber is a great color too. So let's pull some sepia up and see what we get. Here's the sepia. I'm just taking it out. Look how rich and lovely that is. So in the back here, we could definitely have it nice and dark. Get it right in there. Okay, and there's another area right in here behind the neck where I have these nice lines. It gets very dark in here. And again, dark in here, and then we can use the wetness to allow us to soften some of those lines and some of that color where we need to, but some of this area needs to be nice and dark. And now I'm going to watch where my grasses are, because I will need to keep it lighter to get those grasses in. Didn't mark everything off. Here we go. We're going to bring that back right into there. And it's nice and shiny and dark down here too. Right at the base. So I'm using quite a lot of pigment, very little, and I'm trying to use it. A fan brush could work too. Trying to notice that there are fur lines and little bits of different fur pieces that are shiny, and avoiding just a straight stroke. Here, let's go back here again, because you don't see any more fur really here. We can just nicely paint that. Now, when you do wet on wet, which is what I'm doing here right now, you will definitely see that it does lift the paint, if you notice. So you've got to watch how you use your brush strokes to get a nice even coat. It will not get that much darker either, because it is wet, and it just moves the paint around. It doesn't necessarily give it that dark that you're looking for. And there's some dark up here in between, and a little bit of dark underneath here. Okay, so let's come up front back to the face of the otter. Rather than doing the nose a black at this point. We'll start with some nice dark brown. I'll add a little bit more water on the edge of my brush. And I'm hoping that this tip will allow me to just get in and out. I've got to leave a little bits of jaggedness because it's not all flat. And then it gets flatter. Just going to get some more water. Normally I would show you to create a nice pool of paint, but I'm just quickly doing it fast here. I've made a little bit more there, so that'll help a bit, but I don't want it running around too much because it's smaller. And you see I just kind of went out of the line there, so I'm going to take my tissue and lift. So the less water, more control in some ways, but also in other ways you lose the wonderful techniques that you get with adding the water. Right, and I'm going to go right into the eye here. And the ear. The other eye. Right in there. And it's quite dark just underneath here. It's kind of a combination of shadow and the mouth area. And it goes in between the whiskers here a bit, right along as it follows. And then there's grasses again. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit in here. It's darker here, but it needs to dry a bit more. Darker in here too, it needs to dry a bit more. And we'll probably use a neutral tint, or we can even go with an ultramarine blue to get the darks. Now, since we have this really dark color, we could actually do this background too. And I'm just taking some water and just starting off with a layer here so you can see. Let's get that right in there. Trying to keep it nice and smooth along the edge there. Okay, so that's that. I'm just trying to see if I want to keep this white or if I want to actually add another color underneath there. It could be this color, it could be more of a raw sienna. It's also very dark right in here where I've put this little shadowing, so I knew. Let's go back and get a little bit of that color. Another great color is shadow violet, and so I'm going to show you that in a moment up here because it'll be fun to use that. Also down here some shadows in the wood and around the recesses in here, up in here. So I'll just add those little bits of detail while I'm at it. There's even little bits in here of dark. Okay, so the shadow violet is a combination of purple, orange, I'm just looking here, what do they use? When reading the back, if you're looking at the back of the tube, it says pyrrole orange, ultramarine blue, and viridian. And so you could make that just by those three colors on your own, or you can use this as a great background color. And I'm just going to lift it right out of the tube, and since this is all wet, just apply it in here. There we go. Can make a nice coloring as well on the actual otter here if I wanted to add some darks. very wet. It's not drying fast, so I'm going to let it just soak and sit in there and smooth it out a bit. And allow those fur pieces to come up, so I'll just leave that like that. Just make sure I've got my edges. Because it's rough, the water is sitting nicely on top, and I could come in and apply more of a coloring, just moving things around just to see if I want different texture. Okay, let's leave that like that. We're gonna have to let that dry. So I think I'm going to use a gray on the bottom parts, but very, very, very light. So to make a gray, you would take your 3 primary colors, your red, your yellow, and your blue, just like you did with the brown, only now you're trying to neutralize. So as you get from red to orange, and blue then is the actual opposite to that, the complementary color to that, then all of a sudden you're right into the gray. Now it's very gray, so I'll just show you how gray that is. Kind of looks almost brownish, almost looks like my shadow violet. So I'm going to just rinse my brush out, just attempt to see if I can get a very light, there we go, just light coloring in there. And I'm just dry brushing now here because there are some whites in this area. And so if I just add a little bit of that in there, and there'll be the grasses, so I don't need to do a lot. Just using this flat side of the brush and just brushing it in. Okay, so now you can't even really see the otter. That means we need to wait until we can dry this and make it really nice and dark so we can start actually visualizing the otter's body and stuff, and then we can get into the details. In the meantime, if I wanted to, I could actually do some of the grasses, but I think because it's all wet right now, I think I should wait. And I'll just show you what we've got here, and we'll come back to it. Hi, and welcome back to Watercolor with Sonia. Today, we've let it dry overnight with this shadow violet background, and I've just gone in and turned the paper around because I can't show it to you on the screen properly. And I did some jagged edges here with some sepia. Now I'm going to go in with my brush and a darker sepia color. We had shadow violet before. I'm actually going to go back and find the shadow violet, but I will do one layer of sepia first. I'm now just activating that sepia that I had put into my tray yesterday, trying to get some really good dark pigment going here. Okay. So now I'm going to, on dry, with a wet brush, make a bead across, add more liquid, come just about 3/4 of the way down, add more liquid, come again 3/4 of the way down, add more liquid, and now I'm just covering up those areas that I had just done here. Come back in with more pigment and continue the process across, catching up to those nice little areas. Again, going across, more pigment, more pigment, and more pigment. Finally to the edge here, which is quite soft actually. There we go. Now that I have this pigment here, I can go back into my ear and darken some of the ear up. I'm using the tip of the brush. I can also darken up part of the nose here. Again, remembering that there's little hairs around it, so it's not completely even. It is rounder here than I have it. And then the type of mustache there. And then underneath the lip here. The eyes can get a little bit darker, just on the one area here. But I don't want to do too much more there. Now, coming back to, so we're letting the upper part dry. You can still see some of the pigment here, kind of in layers. So I'm going to activate more, and I'm going to go across again. With lots of pigment here. If you press too hard, you will get that line in between. So try and be as light as possible, using most of the brush as possible to avoid getting any fine lines. And I am still just working with my brush and the pigment. I haven't really done a lot of mixture anymore. I'm working straight, almost full pigment. Okay, that looks something there. Looks fairly even now, quite dark. Okay, so going back to the darkest parts here, the fur. I will show you in just a minute with one, but I'm just going to get this one area here that comes down in between the grass pieces. And then starts to break up. So I'm using a tip. I can also use a fine liner type of brush. And then back here, same thing. Add another couple of layers here. You get that really nice dark fur back there. And then just do little jagged marks to bring it up. Here the same thing, the jagged marks are coming this way. And around down here. Leaving some of this lighter color in between. And then it's very dark down at the base. And quite even there. Okay, and it's very dark at the base. Here it actually comes right across here, but it's not as even. There's some little bits of unevenness there. And going back in here and adding that. And there's some nice lighter jagged edges in there. Coming to the front, again, in between the whiskers here. And right across. And I believe this is his other paw, actually. Yeah, it is. So his paw is really dark at the base. And it comes up towards his face, and then there's some nice jagged coloring in there. And I'll do just a bit of a highlight along the edge. even this out a bit here. The other paw is hiding behind the grasses here. Okay, a little bit maybe more on the edge of the nose there. Don't want to do too much now. We have a fairly good background, although I see some marks here that I'm not happy where it's dried. But you got to be careful with wet on wet because you'll lift if you're not careful. I'll leave that for now. Slowly drying. Okay. Now this would be a good time to maybe put the grass in so that we can actually see where the grass is. And I want to use my smaller brush for that. And I mentioned sap green, which can be created from yellow and red. Yellow and blue. I happen to have some sap green right here, so we'll start with this sap green right here. Now I'm noticing that some of the grass is quite light. Let's start working by his face here. So there's some lines that I put in. So see, that's quite olivey. So I'm going to come back, where's the yellow, and put in some yellow. So just going to bring some yellow in here. Actually, that's the hansa yellow right there. Just so you can see how that yellow, that's exactly the yellow we want. We can start marking the yellow on the grasses first, and then come back in and put the green once it's dry. Grasses are coming out of the kind of, I don't know, it looks mossy right around here. Comes up along here, it's a lot darker in there. And it's kind of coming out of the wood in different clumps. And then there's a much larger kind of grass here. With these small brushes, you'll find that you'll have to repeat and repeat. And my recommendation, even a rigger would work really well. This is kind of like a rigger, not quite as long. And so therefore it doesn't hold the paint as long, but the rigger will hold the paint longer. Oh, this grass is up there. Up here I put in where the red is. And there's some darks in here eventually, and then grasses come down in here. Grasses shoot out here. And I'm just looking here. They are working all the way around here. So I'm going to use my other brush now because it's the picture, the image actually shows it a little less focused here. So let's just start by adding in some of this. And then we can darken it from there. And a little bit more there. That's a little bit more. Okay. Eventually there's one that comes up here a bit with the green. Okay. Having done all that, I can see a little bit of grass over here, just in that area. All right, let me just push that up so you can see it all. And we'll give it a break for a moment. Okay, we're back. I have this flat now. And I was mentioning in the write-up that I have thought of using the flat brushes or fan brushes. Here are 2 fan brushes. This is a dollar store fan brush, a lot more synthetic, a lot fuller. This is a regular, more, not so synthetic, a lighter fur brush, thinner too, which helps. And then this is a bit of a beveled side regular flat brush. Here's a 1/4 inch flat brush. Oh, there we go. So these are all available to be used. This one was a bit dry, and now I've smoothed it out a bit. I was also thinking one of the colors that I haven't talked about really was burnt sienna. And I'm noticing in the photograph that burnt sienna is also, we kind of have it here when we put the red in and we're doing that bit of orange by doing our mixed colors. So burnt sienna, burnt scarlet, burnt orange are all great colors from that perspective. And I'm just looking to see if I have a copy of the picture here that I can show you. So, take a quick picture from the computer here. So you can see here, there it is. So you can definitely see in this area the more of the burnt sienna orangey area. And then the others is just much lighter in this area. So I'm going to activate my burnt sienna. It's in here and as a half pan. Just trying to get some, you can see it there. And I want to see behind the ears, there's a little bit more of a, that's it, that coloring. And I want to keep some of the whites by the ear. So I could actually bring this, because it's going to be darker in the other areas, so I can bring it right back like that. There's a lot of white here that I've kind of lost. I don't want to lose any more white than I have to here, so I'll just put just around a little bit more on that, just a little bit of the roundness of the facial features in there. On this side, there are some little bits of brown. I'm just going to use the burnt sienna around them. Now, I'm trying to see if just by touching with the brush lightly, I'd get enough shadow and get a little bit of unevenness so that it looks like the fur is there and not just a line. I'm looking over here and it does come underneath the eye a bit and up here a bit. This is definitely lighter around the nose and then it gets darker up here. And there's more light in between. So let's add some of that and we can soften a little bit of that area that we put in here. Here a bit more, right by the eye. Watch the eye to see if there's any whites that you want to keep there. It's a bit more just there. Just coming into the cheek a bit here. Now that's gone a little bit darker because I was messing with this color in here and rubbing it. So it gone onto the brush, which is lucky on my part because it's exactly the color I want, but just know that it wasn't exactly the burnt sienna that I started with. There's a little bit more, just a hint of more color in here. Be very careful along here. Don't lose all those whites if you don't have to. Okay, so now I see a little bit more up here, but not much. Let's go back and get a little bit more. We may have to come back in with a Q-tip to soften some of these edges. I'm not sure. All right. I did have the one, oh yeah, it's in the water here. Okay. Going back to my burnt sienna. There's this area here just above the eye that I did quite strongly. Now, I could actually just lift it a bit. And it's great when it's had a day to dry because you can lift it so much more easily. So now I'm going to come back in with my tiny fine. Now, see, that's wet right now. If I put this in, it could spread all the way around, so I have to be very careful since I just lifted it all. And I'm going to add just a little bit more of these details in here to the face to try and get... This is going to take the hardest part because it's just watching those lines and just trying to add the fur now into the lines. Excuse me. I'm going to some ultramarine blue here for a moment. I want to just see if adding that into the leg is going to give it even darker. Grab some coffee here. Okay. Because maybe even using the blue as opposed to the brown will give it just that little extra dark that I want. It's also a complementary color to some of the reds and can have a nice effect on that too. Let's see, if I put it into a little bit of the fur, what happens? Do you see it or do you not? Because it's almost like there's a little bit of gray in the fur as well. So you can certainly try it. Be wary that it's going to be maybe a little bit bluer than you want, so you may have to come back in. I see this area, although it seems kind of whitish, there's definitely more like fur here that you can see the edges of, even up for the eye here and across. To try and get that roundness as dark as possible to actually look as though it was an eye is very difficult. Maybe I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray for the moment. I just want to see if I can get it even darker here and rounder now that I've got my smaller brush. And then just like this little edges. Same here, a little rounder, darker, darker back here. A little darker right up in here. Starting to show up a little bit. Now, there are these little tiny lines in between here that there are just a couple of little breaks so that you start to see the difference in the fur. And there's a lot of transition there, so you can take a lot of time with different colors to just go in there and enjoy the detail of just getting the fur that little bit more defined in between the areas. He looks like he just came out of the water and he's a bit wet. So then you could go back into the sepia and just add those little bits of extra nice dark little bits. And down in here There's a little darker. I'm trying to get that fur to look like fur. Just coming out and just being a little bit dark in certain areas. Let's get it darker in here. Right above the little area, there's actually little dots in here, but it's too dark. I've got too dark a color right now. I'll just put in a little bit of that extra dark there. I'd like to do it here, just a wee bit. Not too dark, so I'll just dab that a bit. Because there are those nice little marks going up. And just be prepared, if you start making it too wet, it won't respond as well, right? Because now it's going to just move around and start to puddle. A bit more back here. Now this little guy's ear here, we've done a few times where we've tried to get it a little darker each time. There's a bit more fur darks in here. Looking at the eye, comes around just on the outside of the eye a bit more. Even here a bit more. Into this area a bit more. And then tiny bit just by the whiskers. And again, a tiny bit just out here. Here again, just down there. I think I would go with burnt sienna to do just those little dots here. Oops, too much water. Oh, that's the other thing. Test it out. If it's too much water, just use your tissue to get that excess water off so you can get that right thing. Now, I will take that extra freckle away, but just dabbing it. I won't come back right away because if I do, what's going to happen is it's just going to blob around, right? Because it's too wet at the moment. So you basically have to go straight to your pigment, don't use a little water, and then just add in a few little freckles there. And you just go around adding a bits of fur where you think you want that little bit of red to come in. This is where it's the hardest, where you've added a little bit of a line. So you can come back in that flat brush that I showed you. Oh, that's the soft one. I don't want that one. The flat brush that I have, if it's wet, you can just push it around on the paint and get it a little bit of a softer value. You can do that when it's still wet, when you originally apply it, and that yesterday I didn't think about that. So yes, a wet brush without any paint on it can be your friend, but be careful as you go around doing this and you get those kind of feelings of the lines going, you will change color, right? Because now you're mixing with the other paints that are in here. So clean your brush every so often so that you can go back in there and try that out again. So it starts to look a little bit more like a real fur. You can even lift a little bit in between here by, again, wet brush, scraping, and then you can actually take the tissue and lift it. It'll go fast. When you do that, you have to be careful of how big a brush you use for that. So you could have actually done that by painting, say, burnt sienna and then lifting, but that's a lot of work. So now I'm just going to come up here with the side of this flat brush, just add in a bits here and there, because it's faster than using that little one. This is still all sepia that I'm using right now, but it seems to be light enough that I can get that feeling of those fur pieces. Now here I'd like to get a little bit more burnt sienna in. I see it there, and I'd like to add just a bit more in here. A little more solid. And then just add some of that color. And here I'd like a little bit more burnt sienna up in that other hind leg here. And because it's further back, it doesn't need to be quite as detailed. Okay, there's a little bit more detail here at the front of the head. And I think I'd like a little bit darker, whoops, a little darker just on that hind quarter. So I'm going to use a little bit more ultramarine blue in here. Maybe even some Payne's gray. Same thing right in here. Just a little bit there and there. A little bit more here, a little bit more there. I'm looking to see if there's a shadow, and there is definitely a shadow down there. There is actually shadow here too, and just little bits kind of going along there. And that can be used right in here for the wood. Can you see that? And the shadow in here. This is blue and a little bit of gray, and there needs to be more of that in here, around this area and there. And definitely right around, I'm going to take the blue and the gray again, just around this clump of grass down the base here, right around there, down below here a bit. In here a bit. The wood grain we'll get to in a bit. Just put a little bit of that gray in there. Okay. Here, this is pretty close. There's a little line along here. I'll just put that just a little soft. Then I'll soften it with what? My little brown brush of this line around. Oops, it's got a bit too much brown. There we go. Just soften that up a bit. And what I can do is just add a little bit of a darker shadow here just around this area so that I will capture the white a bit more. I'm looking for the blue just to give it a bit more bluish tinge. Dry brushing it just around there. What I'd like to do is have it darker here so that it actually accentuates those fur pieces there. So let's get a little bit darker in that area where their paw is. Some of that blue and just let it go out. I'd still like to see a little bit darker there. Even here, just a little bit darker. Okay, he's coming together. So one of the things that I see a little bit more of, I could put in a little bit of blue or brown in here just to get those little bits of hair coming up over here. The blue is nice because it's giving a little bit of a contrast to that nice burnt sienna. There is a bit of a nice brownish edge here, very dark, right around the outside of that ear. Now, again, I used the pigment and didn't have enough water, so then it was just dry brushing around there. So let's just use a little bit of fur aspect there. Maybe a bit more up here. How about behind the ear? Needs a bit darker too. And then we're going to do the reveal with the taking off the masking fluid, see if that has enough effect. more, just a little dry brushing in here. Okay, let's work on the grass. I'm going to use the flat brush again, try and see if I've got the right sap green that I thought I had, because it seems to be mixed with something, making it more of like an olivey green. So I'm going to use a little phthalo blue and get it a little bit darker. So now I've got this kind of greenish color on here. There we go. And that may be too strong a brush to work with. Let's try pulling it through and letting it go over the yellow here. So I could even have it a little bit lighter. I have a bit of a lighter greenish color here. I think I'm going to go straight phthalo blue and see what happens. That's too strong. Yeah, that's too strong. There's some nice shadows in here, but it's just a little too strong for what I want. Okay. I'm going to add some more yellow to this green and try and make it more fluorescent green. What you're not seeing is me mixing this. So let's just see if I can find a piece of paper. And what I'm testing out is how green do I really want it? Or do I want it more yellowish, bright green? Do I want a little bit warmer yellow in there? That makes it more olivey. No, I need the cool yellow for sure. That's kind of what I'm looking for there. Okay. So now I'm just going to try and do some brush strokes. Now I should use a smaller brush. Fan brush could be useful. Let's try the fan brush. Gonna wet the fan brush, go in here, see if I can get more of that. Add a little bit of Payne's gray, phthalo green, phthalo blue, actually green shade. There we go. Now we're getting some, just those little shadows in there. Okay, let's go back now, back to the green that I had, very lightly. There we go. Getting that feel for the grass, and then we'll come in with just the blue paints, phthalo blue, green shade. Get some of those shadows just in the center here. Make it look like those tufts of grass. It's a bit more dark in here. I'll come in with a different brush. Just a few strokes in here. Now there's that one that comes up here. So I'll just flick it right up. Pull it right up. A few more here. Let's go back with that other green. There's that other green coming out. There we go. More. Okay, so we'll come back in with the other brush, tiny brush, just the phthalo blue, and now darken those areas in between here. There's more dark in here, underneath here, in between here. Even down below there. I can even use some of that here, dry brushed. Now the other edge here, right here, kind of there, kind of comes across. A few maybe blue dry brushing here. Let's get a little bit more darks here. The only thing I like to do is a little bit of that pattern. I'm going to go with my gray and see if I can follow those lines a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be a little bit of line. could be a little bit darker in a couple little places. Smaller a little bit. I'm using burnt sienna now. I'm going to add a little blue to give it, the ultramarine blue, just to give it that little bit of, hopefully pushing the receding it a bit. I'm doing a very little bit of dry brushing. I've got to make sure I don't have too much water on here. Trying to get that, just that feeling in here. It's a bit darker there. Let's get the sepia back in here. Just to feel that edge of the wood. We didn't get any grass there, so let's go back in with my green up here. I think I'm going to add a little bit more blue just in this area in here. Okay, so now for the reveal. It has to be dry, and I have to have my rubber cement eraser. So give me a second, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back with a rubber cement eraser, and this is to take off the whites that we had with the masking fluid. So we're going to see how much of a mess I get with that. I've got to be careful here because it's still wet. I really don't remember how much I've put on here. So the way to find out if you've gotten all your whites off is to feel if it still feels rough. I've got to be careful, some of it still feels rough here. I got quite a little bit of weight on his eyes still. Okay. Just a little bit there. And that's why when you do this and you find out that you had applied it and you go, wow, I didn't even see it anymore. That's why sometimes the blue is better than the regular color. Okay, so we've lost a lot of paint, but we've gained a lot of white. So how do we kind of add in just a little bit of those pieces to get that going? You basically need your small brush and slowly do the detail again. So for example, around the eyes here, I would come in directly with either really dark blue or my Payne's gray. And I'm going to increase my photo here for a second. I'm going to just put my brushes in the water to really see the eyes. So this eye is actually quite light. There's a bit of dark around there. And it's actually kind of bluish. So kind of a bluish film that goes quite high up. So I'm going to now just tidy up this area in here a bit. And here it's actually darker at the base and whiter up at the top, and I'll help that out by a little bit of a gel pen. Here just needs a bit of touch over top. And now, where do I see the ear? The ear, I'll just go around the back a bit and just add a little bit of fur around that. Up here at the top, definitely just needs fur, needs brown fur. Up here needs a little bit more of a burnt sienna mixture. Let's see here. You know what? I'm going to try the fan brush, the small fan brush. Right. I've got my image of my, I've got it so focused on the eyes now that I've got to come back. Okay, there we go. Oh, not quite. Okay, let's just see here. I think we've got it. So if I bring the fan brush just slightly up like that. We'll bring in a few more browns maybe. How about sideways? That helps sideways. Don't want to really lose all of that, right? Okay, so we're going to go in sideways now with a little bit of darker brown. The other ear, I need to go in with a little bit of gray, I think. Just a little bit of brown on the back here. And use the idea of the hair coming up. So I got a few of the whiskers showing up here, but they kind of blend in a lot. So do the whiskers here, they really just disappeared. So we'll use a little bit of sepia just to give that shadow, and then I'll come in with the gel pen. Yeah, want a little bit of the gray blue coloring. Here we go. Around here. Okay, that's not too bad. You can always tweak it, definitely. I got those little whites of the grass, but it doesn't, can't see that line coming through as well, so I could take and put a line through there a bit. Now the other thing you could do, you could even scrape to add some more whites to the fur. In the example here, I could actually scrape that area, or I could actually come back in with Chinese white or gouache. You have to be careful with the gouache because it'll really show up. So right now, I'm activating my Chinese white right in there because I need it to be more pigment-like than just watery. And you can come back over top and you can actually, they're gonna definitely be coming back and softening all that color, and it's going to still look a little white, but it's not going to look as white as you're seeing right now. So here, same thing, you could do that with the whites up there. Even here on the nose, to create a little bit more white on the nose here, it will dry quite a bit. If you found that you didn't quite get where you wanted to, you could add that a little bit there. Here, how about even just putting a little bit of fur back in here, a little bit lighter. Even in here. That will not stay as light as it is here right now, just so you know, but if you wanted the highlights of those white fur coming where it's wet and shiny, you will get a feeling of it. It's not going to be all that distinctive. You can keep going, and if you get to the point where you want even more, you'll have to keep adding and adding. Okay, so for these nice whiskers, so attempting first with the white over top of that area, it's very hard to get those back in a way that's going to really make them stand out. So another opportunity with that is to use the white gel pen, which I happen to have here. It's a jelly pen right there. Can you see that? Jelly pen. There we are, jelly roll. So with that, you just come in and you activate it and you let it come over the darks, and you will get those whiskers. And then you could also shadow the whiskers, right? Putting a little bit of gray, just looking where he is, in between too. There's a couple that come out here, even up by the eye. Up here too. So see how that really, you could soften it even more. Let's see here, if I were just to show you here where we've added the white over top, if you just want to just blend it in a bit more just to get that feeling, right? Underneath the nose area, so that it's not all just white. In here I said there was a little bit of, I'm going to put a little bit of cobalt blue into his eye here. It wasn't just white. Do the same there. And here, need a little bit, so you could just put a little bit of that blue in there if you wanted to. Be very careful. Here's a ultramarine blue just coming in behind under the whiskers to hopefully accentuate those whiskers a bit. You have to do it lightly. I'm not great right now trying to get that lightness there. Under his little whiskers here, you could put a little bit of blue there too. There seemed to be a bit of shadow. That's maybe a too dark shadow there. But that's also an opportunity you could shadow if you found that you weren't getting it other ways. You could shadow with the blue. And I'm looking here, he could be a little bit darker in some of these areas, so let's add a little bit more sepia feel right there. A little bit more burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is such a nice color. Trying to see how far it goes up. A little bit more in the front forehead, I think, too, would be nice. Not enough water. How's that looking? Oh yeah, it's standing out a bit more with that. I mean, the brown's nice, but the red warms it up and pulls him forward a bit more, I think, too. There you go. There is our river otter. And I'll just sign my John Henry down here somewhere. There we go. I had really a lot of fun doing that because I haven't done a lot of river otters. Actually, I think this is probably... It's similar to a hamster in a way with a fur. Definitely has some of those aspects of it. And I've definitely done a few hamsters. So again, you could go back in and be detailed as you want with the fur. Just depends. Just try not to lose the lightness of some of these areas in here, which are lovely. Just adding a little bit of dark into the edges. This is sepia again. Great. Thanks for joining me.